Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Russell. I'm with Hourglass, and welcome to Listening to Lancaster. Today, I am pleased to be with the Lancaster Farmland Trust. Got Jeff Swinehart and Amanda Hickle with us today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. So could you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourselves and the organization Lancaster Farmland Trust?
Absolutely. So Jeff Swinehart, the Chief Operating Officer here at Lancaster Farmland Trust. Been with the trust since 2000, so quite a long tenure, I would say. But born and raised in Lancaster County, down in the southern end, in the River Hills and the Holtwood area, and then spent a fair amount of time on farms, and really is where I gained my appreciation for agriculture. And then obviously, off to college, came back, and had an opportunity to start here at the trust, which I did, and have been here ever since. And it's been enjoyable and rewarding all at the same time. But Lancaster Farmland Trust, we're a private nonprofit organization established back in 1988, primarily to protect the agricultural resources of Lancaster County. We do a fair amount of work with the Plainset community, the old order Amish and conservative Mennonite farmers who may choose not to work with a government program. Since 1988, we have preserved 516 farms, over 31,000 acres. We lead the state in Pennsylvania in terms of land trusts. We hold more easements than any other land trusts, and have more agricultural land preserved than any other land trust. Over about the past decade or so, we've really become active on the stewardship side of our agricultural lands. So not only protecting them, but providing technical and financial assistance to our farmers related to the environmental performance of their farms, specifically tied to Chesapeake Bay requirements and the 2025 deadline that is quickly approaching Lancaster in terms of nutrient and sediment reduction. So we spend a fair amount of our time today working with farmers on those practices.
Wow.
I'll pitch it over to Amanda.
All right. And my name is Amanda Hickle. I'm the Director of Development and Communications for Lancaster Farmland Trust. Jeff mentioned that he has a long tenure with the organization, and I also have a long tenure of less than his, but still 13 years. So a lot of the folks that have been with the organization have been there for a while, which I think speaks to the kind of organization that it is. So I actually grew up in the Pocono Mountains, and went to college in Western PA, and came back down to live here in Lancaster County just after college, and grew up a woods girl, but now I'm a farm girl. I won't say I'm necessarily a farm girl because I don't have the technical knowledge, but I do love the views, and it's just an extraordinary community to live in. And I'm responsible for the fundraising and communications for the trust, and it certainly has been an interesting year in terms of reaching out to our community, and so it's a great organization to work for.
Excellent. That is really unusual to have folks in that long of a tenure in a position. That's great.
We love what we do.
Yeah, you must. Excellent. So with all the work you've done, I noticed that you've been active during this time of COVID. So how has COVID affected what you do, and how has your organization responded and met the challenge?
Yeah, it was, I think like many organizations faced, it was quite a shock to really figure out how to work remotely and from a virtual standpoint, and give a lot of credit to Amanda and her team. They've just done an extraordinary job over the past 6 months of figuring that out, and figuring it out very quickly. I mean, we when COVID hit, we wanted to be mindful, and we didn't want to be tone deaf to what was going on in the community, and knew that we couldn't actively be soliciting people for contributions. But we also wanted to stay engaged in a regular communication with our donors and the community, to communicate what we were doing, how we were trying to help the farmers in our area. And just, Amanda and her team unveiled, a really exceptional communications plan where we elevated our communications, started providing new opportunities like webinars. We engaged our board as well as all of our leadership team in reaching out to our donors with phone calls and personal notes, just to check in with them, to see how they were, to see how they were faring, and coping with the implications of COVID-19. And I think that over the past 6 months, we've seen the benefits of that, and Amanda can touch on it some, but we've increased our donor base. Our retention rate is as high as it's ever been. And even while COVID, when people were in lockdown and couldn't get out, and sort of employment status was unsure, our donors were still very committed to our mission, and we're making contributions. Also understanding the implications our farmers were facing, with stories of farmers, dairy farmers having to dump milk, and the concerns people had on the supply chain. Grocery stores weren't stocked with products, and I think that re-engaged people in the importance of agriculture locally, and my hope is that continues.
Wow. That's, I think a lot of organizations have taken this time to, and Amanda, you can probably speak to this too, to retool how they've done communications. Everybody's kind of needed to. So one of the things Hourglass has had as our stalwart event is our first Friday forums, but those have had to move virtually, and we've been able to thankfully retool how we've done that. And I think that your story is very common amongst a lot of nonprofits and community organizations.
You're right, Jonathan. And I like the fact that you use the word retool, because it's a great synonym for the word that we incessantly use right now, which is pivot.
Yes.
That everybody has kind of been forced to do. And I think it's presented some challenges and certainly some opportunities for the trust, which we're fortunate for. And, who would have thought 6 months ago, that right now we'd be still quarantined, still kind of working from home, limited in terms of our communication with folks. And here we are 6 months later, and I think we're all kind of trying to adapt. And so pretty early on in March or April, we kind of sat down and looked at our communications plan and said, how can we take on the challenge of maintaining these, meaningful relationships with our donors, just in different ways. And so there's definitely a slice of our donor demographic that's a little bit older and, maybe not as technologically oriented as the rest of us. And there was certainly a learning curve with everybody during this time. But as Jeff mentioned, our first priority was just reaching out to folks, and on a basic human level, just asking, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Is everything, going okay for you? Are you healthy? And that was kind of our first priority, is just to make sure our donors were okay. And then from there is to really, as you say, retool some of our traditional outreach methods. And so I know you mentioned events that, that was a big part of our outreach and our fundraising strategy. Of course, that got turned upside down. And so we started offering opportunities for our donors and our community to interact with us virtually. Which I think is what a lot of organizations are doing. Some of those opportunities were the webinars that Jeff mentioned. Now I've done a series of about 10 webinars that have engaged about 250 folks, some of which are existing donors, others of which are just, folks in the community that wanted to learn more about what we do. Our next webinar is coming up in October. It's going to be a highlight of one of a farmer. He's actually involved with the Agricultural Preserve Board, Jeffery, who we're going to focus on the harvest and what the harvest looks like for him, going to get a ride on a combine. And so just ways to allow people to put their boots on the ground without being able to put their boots on the ground right now. Right. We've had virtual meetings with donors where they can gather together and learn about the impact of the organization and how we're dealing with the pandemic. We've done offered cycling rides to our donors that they can get out and appropriately socially distant ride on 4 different rides in Lidditz, Intercourse, and Strasburg, with a text to donate option. And we're currently pivoting our major fundraising event, which is called Together for the Land, which is on October 21st typically we hold an annual dinner and silent auction every year. Biggest fundraiser of the year for the trust. Of course, this year we made the decision to go virtual quite a number of weeks ago. And so on the 21st, we're holding our virtual event Together for the Land, which is a complimentary event for the entire community. Anybody can attend free of charge, sponsored by the Winger Group. So we're hopeful that people will be engaged and we can spread the word about our mission and then raise a few dollars to preserve those farms on our waiting list at the same time.
That's fantastic. And it's interesting because I wonder how you've been able to reach out to the Plainsec community that you talked about. So a lot of those events you talked about were virtual. So how are you able to reach out to folks who might not necessarily access those events?
It's always our challenge. It seems to be, and obviously, at the onset, we took a pause. We are required to visit every property that we hold a conservation easement on annually. And generally those are face-to-face types of visits, which is, it's a great way to maintain a relationship with a farmer, and to hear a little bit more about their story and what their challenges are, or, what changes have occurred to their property. And obviously we couldn't do that.
Right.
So we did have a sort of, I would say, a gap in communication, especially with our farmers that are preserved. Although we sent out some print publications, letters to them notifying them about what was occurring internally at our office, and that our staff was working remotely to please call in, leave messages, we'll get back in touch with them. And we started employing some really technology-based solutions in terms of our annual monitoring obligations, using satellite imagery, which still provided, our staff to be able to conduct our annual monitoring that we had to, as well as keeping our volunteers. We have a handful of volunteers who like to be out in the community. They like to help us with monitoring farms, and it still provided them the opportunity to still be engaged and feel as though they were still offering productive time to the organization. We've since started back, meeting with farmers again. Obviously outside, I've been sitting at opposite ends of the picnic table out in the yard and those sort of things. And especially when Recovery Lancaster got launched, we took an active role of reaching out to the agricultural community, offering the PPE kits to make sure that they were available to farmers, went around to different businesses where they regularly would buy goods and services, and provided those kits there, as well as information about some of the financial assistance, and then helped some of those farmers. We probably helped upwards of about 40 different farmers apply.
Oh, wow.
So, and some were successful, others were not in getting the funding. Our good friend Lisa Riggs over at the Economic Development Corporation, she would call me and say, we got requests for $15 million and we only have $10 million, so we knew that there was a lot of demand there, but we really felt like it was our obligation to do that, to provide those resources to our agricultural community, and have now picked back up. We're meeting with farmers again, and they seem to be doing well. Most of them have fared through it. Obviously challenging for them, but most seem to be at least coping, with the current situation.
Good. It's good to hear. That's important help to be able to provide to those folks, and happy that you're able to do it. One of the things that prompted my email to you to want to do this sit down was the articles that were written about a study done from the American Farmland Trust on threats to farmland in our community, and identified in Lancaster that pocket development, so non-contiguous development, is a large threat to farmland and farmland preservation here in Lancaster County. How have you responded to that? Have you seen that as something that is a threat in Lancaster County? And if so, what are some of the tools or some of the strategies you've thought about to engage that issue?
It certainly is an issue in Lancaster County. Those large lot rural developments that happen consume, significant quantities of land because the infrastructure is not there in terms of public sewer and water, and relying all on site septic and water and things like that. And I know in places 2040, the county's comprehensive plan, by their estimates, we probably have twice the amount of our rural land zoned for residential use than what we need based on what we've seen in the past. So it is a concern. I mean, there's been, Lancaster County's been a leader in farmland preservation for decades now. There's a lot of municipalities that have really championed the cause with good zoning in place, and even boards after boards of elected officials have stood fast to those zoning ordinances and have instituted ag security areas, which are a good help in some protection of farmland and as a precursor to qualify for the county state farmland preservation program. But we need to do more. As we all know, Lancaster County is a great place, great quality of life, expecting 120,000 people over the next 20 years. And I think, certainly the implications of COVID now and what that means in terms of our land use policies as we start to see people moving away from more densely populated areas. New York City as an example, there's a lot of people moving to northeastern Pennsylvania. And certainly that's going to have implications. And the best strategy is to, take our available land that is designated for growth and really try and maximize the use of it with the highest density possible. Certainly there's other factors to consider there in terms of transportation and, impacts on local schools. But we have to accommodate the people. And if we really want to protect our agricultural landscape and make sure that agriculture remains a viable industry here, we have to protect that land base. Without it, agriculture ceases to exist.
Right. Yeah. In terms of looking at farms, do you have a priority list of farms that, this is a threatened farm or this is a farm that we want to target? How does that work? Do you, in terms of preservation of these farms, do you have folks that come to you, or are you aggressively pursuing different farms?
All the above.
Well, maybe.
We currently have a waiting list of 50 farmers, represents 4,000 acres. It's one of the reasons that our board went through the process of studying the feasibility of a capital campaign, which we are in the process of. It's not hit the public phase yet, but a goal of raising $7.5 million, with $4 million of that directly going for the preservation of those 4,000 acres. And wow. We've been working at it now for about 18 months. We're doing well. There was recent communication a few months ago that the Steinman Foundation awarded a $2 million matching grant to Lancaster Farmland Trust, the largest award that we as an organization have ever received and the largest grant that the Steinman Foundation has ever offered to an organization. So we felt really honored.
Congrats.
For that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But we're constantly reaching out to farmers. We'll do periodic mailings to different geographies. We're constantly getting phone calls from farmers who are interested in protecting. And when we have interest, we have a ranking criteria that we evaluate properties on, and that contiguous aspect of how close are they to other protected lands is something that we place a lot of value on, and recently have modified that based on the Lancaster County Planning Commission and their analysis of their highest priority parcels for advancing, that countywide strategy. So we're incorporating that so that we can work in tandem with the county's comprehensive plan.
Great, fantastic stuff. But what we like to do as we wrap up here, what we like to do each time is ask a fun question of each of our guests, and that is a lot of people have taken up different activities, read new books, watched TV shows, binged things. What have you taken up during this COVID time? Something new?
Go ahead, Amanda. You can go first.
Well, I have to say we've been incredibly busy, so it's hard to take up new things. But my husband and I live in Lidditz. We have 2 dogs, so we've been trying to get out and about and walk the dogs as much as possible. And of course, Netflixing, and currently binging Longmire, which not sure about that one yet, but yeah, looking for suggestions if you have any, Jonathan.
Okay, I don't know. It's a good one. I like Longmire. I thought that wasn't bad. Cool.
Yeah, and at the onset, luckily, my wife and I have 2 kids. My son is 10 and my daughter is 7. And we all sort of recently got, new bikes. So that was fortunate before there was sort of the lot of sale of bikes, and now you can't find any bikes. We had our bikes. So we did a lot of biking, and we did a lot of camping over the summer, which, was one of the outdoor social distancing aspects that you could do, and provided us the opportunity to actually travel around a little bit. And in the beginning of it, my wife and I, we got sucked into the Tiger King, and watched that through, and actually recently just started watching Longmire as well, which I think was a recommendation by our communications coordinator, Laura Brenner, who made that comment over a virtual staff meeting here recently.
Excellent. Yeah, we did a little bit of both of your activities. We have a dog that my fiance and I that we walk quite a bit. I think he's had more walks now than he's ever had in his life. And then we did some camping. So excellent. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, and just appreciate all the good work you're doing in Lancaster County, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.